Hello, St. Lukers, and welcome to Your Week with St. Luke's as we look at this week's text from the Gospel of Luke in our new worship series, Redefined Kindness. I'm Pastor Melissa, and today we are going to be looking at a very familiar passage from Luke's Gospel. Now, this is one of the stories that is only found in Luke's Gospel, and one of the stories that is the reason many of us find ourselves declaring that this is our favorite Gospel. Now, if you want to follow along in your Bible, we'll be reading from Luke chapter 15 this week. We begin with verses 1 and 2, and then we will jump to verse 11. It starts with, "All the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around Jesus to listen to him. The Pharisees and legal experts were grumbling, saying, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" And then we jump ahead to verse 11. Jesus said, "A certain man had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the inheritance.' And then the father divided his estate between them. Soon afterward, the younger son gathered everything together and took a trip to a land far away. There, he wasted his wealth through extravagant living. When he had used up his resources, a severe food shortage arose in that country, and he began to be in need. He hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He longed to eat his fill from what the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. And when he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have more than enough food, but I'm starving to death? I will get up and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Take me on as one of your hired hands.' So he got up and went to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. And then his son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fattened calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting, because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. Coming in from the field, he approached the house and heard music and dancing, and he called one of the servants and asked what was going on. And the servant replied, 'Your brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he received his son back safe and sound.' Then the older son was furious and didn't want to enter in, but his father came out and begged him. He answered his father, 'Look, I've served you all these years, and I never disobeyed your instruction. Yet you've never given me as much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours returned, after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him.' Then his father said, 'Son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.'" Now, this is probably a familiar story to you, isn't it? Chances are you know it by the title, The Prodigal Son or The Prodigal Child. But there's a few titles it's been given, because one of the key questions that we often play with when we are preaching or teaching on this text is, who exactly is this story about? Is it the younger son and his prodigalness and his repentance? Is it the father who is generous and grace-filled? Or is it the older brother who just doesn't seem to get it? You know, how we title it tells us how we want to interpret it. And so the fact that we often just call it the prodigal son goes ahead and tells us where we want to place our attention. One commentator gives it a title to try and encompass all of these and calls it the prodigal son, the waiting father, and the elder brother. But regardless of what we title it, there's a reason we all seem to know this story, and a reason it's so widely used and wrestled with. So today we're going to try and remove these titles, so I want you to set aside your understanding this as the, quote, prodigal son story, and just listen and begin to understand the gospel message within it. So we're going to take each of these characters and look at them individually, and maybe by the end of this you'll have another idea of who you think the main character of the story is. So first, we have the younger son. Now, this is the character we, of course, talk about most in the story, based on that usual title that we give it. But let's look closer at some of the key points we see when we're talking about this particular character. Now, the younger son asks his father for his inheritance early. Now, the way that society worked in this time was that your livelihood, your well-being, everything was centered around relationship. That's how inheritance was determined. That's how your safety nets were created. So by asking for his inheritance early, he's not only asking for something that would have been unusual for social custom, but he's actually breaking social covenants to not only receive at the appropriate time, but to help support the family through that relationship as well. You know, much of Palestinian society, as we've talked about in previous weeks, was based around systems of honor and shame. And so that's a huge theme throughout this story, especially centering around this younger son. Simply by breaking this social covenant, he was bringing shame to his family. But it doesn't stop there, because we hear that his behavior once he leaves home with his inheritance continues to fly in the face of the honor codes in his society. As the text says, he was wasting his wealth through extravagant living. So strike 2 on his honor in the community, and by extension, his family's honor. And then, once he has fully squandered what he receives, he finds himself in the lowest possible position, hiring himself out to a Gentile and ending up caring for pigs. So yet again, strike 3, working for a Gentile and feeding swine, which was an abomination in Jewish law. Now, this is where he finds himself at a crossroads. And it's also where we find ourselves at a crossroads to decide how we feel about this particular character. We hear him rehearse a speech to give to his father upon his return. And as we read this speech, we have to wonder, is it sincere? Because what we want, and often what we choose to interpret here, is that the son is truly repentant. He realizes his choices have brought dishonor on him and his family, that he has disrespected his father, that he has broken God's law, and he wants to make amends. Now, our hope is usually that the son has grown in his faith, and that his prodigal spending will be overtaken by prodigal loving. But there's also the possibility that he has just reached the end of his rope and has no other option. The text simply tells us that he came to himself or came to his senses, and this could mean a couple of things. It could mean that he's reclaiming his identity, with the term of coming to himself being something that acknowledges the imago Dei in him, the image of God, the identity as being part of his family, and he has become willing to admit his error and return to his heritage. And so he rehearses his speech, not to ask to become a son again, but to be a servant in his father's home. He has hit rock bottom, not only in his living situation, but also emotionally and spiritually. He's realized the consequences of his actions are also affecting his family. But there's another possibility. It's a more cynical one, of course, that maybe he realized that his current trajectory just meant he was going to crash and burn. And so this was the only option he had left. He realized he had squandered what he was given, but even so, no matter how tirelessly he labored, there was a famine in this land. And in this community he had found himself in, he didn't have any standing. He had no relationship, none of what he had in his home village, and that he would never be able to get anywhere on his own. He may have found himself stuck in an unmanageable reality, realizing that independence was not only a bad or shameful concept, but also not actually achievable for him. Now, regardless of his sincerity or his motivation, he knew that he wouldn't be coming back to a welcoming scene. That shame and honor culture would play out fully upon his return. You see, this son had brought shame on his father and his family, so he can expect to be shamed by the village too. Because see, his decision doesn't just affect him, it doesn't just affect his family, it affects the whole village, because it puts his family's ability to make a living at risk. His actions have undermined his family's honor and potentially soured their relationships with their neighbors. His actions are not just about him. They're about his whole social ecosystem. So he knew upon his return, the townspeople would not be throwing a party. They would actually be more likely to host a specific ceremony that was done at this time for a son of the village who had lost money to Gentiles or married an immoral woman. And in this ceremony, they would gather around him, breaking jars with corn and nuts, and declare that he was to be cut off from the village. His entry into the village would be humiliating, as his former community expressed their anger and resentment toward his actions. But that actually isn't the scene we see as Jesus paints this parable. It's not at all what we see, because that's when we really get to see clearly the second character in the story. We have the father. Now, there's a great argument to be made that the father is the main character in this story, because when we are introduced to the two other characters, they are called sons and not brothers. It implies that their relationship to their father is what is most important. This also brings back memories of other brother relationships and how they wrestled with God and with one another and with their parents, Cain and Abel, Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brothers. And there's tradition in many of those stories that the younger son is favored. So hearers and early readers of this parable might not have been that surprised to see the father give in to his son's request. Even so, it's a dramatic moment. The literal translation of verse 12 is that he divided his life between his sons. But we really see who the father's character is when his younger son returns. Because upon his son's return, seeing his misery, he doesn't start with an "I told you so." He doesn't suggest that his redemption will come at a later time when he has paid for his sins. Instead, this father runs and embraces his child at the road, still out in the prodigal wilderness, if you will. He embraces his son fully in that moment. Now, in the social constructs we've already talked about, this man owes his son nothing. He fulfilled every one of his obligations as a father, prematurely, when he divided his assets and gave half to the boy. So when it comes to an honor or shame society, choosing honor would have likely been to turn the younger son away. There might have even been shame in his action of running excitedly toward him. After all, his son, even in the best of times, would have been seen as inferior to him in rank and status. His behavior is strange for that social structure. Fathers do not run to their children. This might be something a mother would do, as well as the kiss that he gives. So those villagers waiting to shame his son would have had reason to bring shame upon the father now as well. But the father sets all of that aside and takes the action that his compassion drives him toward. He exposes himself to humiliation to protect his son from humiliation. He puts aside dignity and power and position for the good of another. And as his son tries to begin his carefully rehearsed speech, sincere or not, the father doesn't even need to hear it. He immediately begins issuing orders to servants to prepare a banquet. He gives his son a robe, a mark of distinction. He gives him a signet ring, a sign of belonging and authority in the family. He gives him shoes, only worn by someone who was free. He not only makes it clear to his son that he belongs and is welcome in his home, but he makes it clear to the entire community that there is no shame to be had here. There is only joy and only celebration. There is a decent argument to be made that the father here is the centerpiece of this story. That this is a story of a father who never stops loving his child, no matter his actions, no matter his choices, no matter how he has brought shame or hurt to him or the family. His motivations are always compassion and love, while his son's motivations all pivot around money. He's actually a pretty terrible financial advisor, but he shows us a witness of love for human persons over money or possessions. But we can't stop here, because the banquet is not the end of the story. The father's love for his younger son is not the end of the story. We get one more character to consider. We finally have the older son. Now, there have been some pretty great sermons preached on this older son figure. Now, often we like to compare ourselves to the younger son because we want to know that we can be forgiven by God, that no matter how far we go away, that we can always come back and be welcomed with open arms. But chances are that those of us who have grown up around the church, those of us who have been around a long time, we more often find ourselves starting from the mindset of this older son. When he sees what his father has offered to his younger brother, Not at the beginning, where he was sure to get an equal share, but at the end, where it seems that fairness has been thrown out the window by his irresponsible father. The older son is not too pleased. Like the beginning of the story where the younger son's place is characterized by distance, we see another kind of distance as the older son refuses to enter the house where the banquet is taking place. And like with his younger son, the father goes to his older son as well. His compassion is consistent. Now, in the conversation, the older son doesn't use relational names to identify his younger brother. He calls out his father by naming him this son of yours. And again, showing the break in social structure that had taken place. And yet the father reminds this older son that the relationship was never and will never be broken, by first calling him son, and then responding about the younger son, calling him this brother of yours. We know that there's a connection here, and this character is essential to the story because the chapter begins with those first 2 verses we read. There's a reason we read those in leading into this story, because we have a reminder of those scribes and Pharisees who were upset about who Jesus was spending time with. The elder brother here is there to unmask those Pharisees and legal experts who have missed the point entirely about whose side God is on. And like the context of the parable, we don't have a specific resolution to the story of the elder brother. We don't know if he goes to join in the celebration. We also don't know if the younger brother follows through on his repentant speech. But like the question of who is the main character in the parable, the rest of the story is for the reader to decide. Now, this parable is a favorite because it hits all the best storylines that connect with us as humans. Adolescent rebellion, alienation from family, the appeal of the new and foreign, the consequences of foolish living, the warmth of home remembered, the experience of self-encounter, awakening and repentance, the joy of reunion, the power of forgiveness, the dynamics of brotherly love, the contrast between relationships of merit and relationships of love. As I said at the beginning, there's a reason it's one of the most well-known parables. But this week, we're focusing on the context or the concept of witness in worship. What does it mean to redefine the word witness in light of this gospel? After wrestling with these and taking away those titles that we often give it, if you were to choose a main character, which one helps you best define the idea of witness from a Christian perspective? Which character do you think is the protagonist? Just one thought, I wonder if it could be that we are to consider ourselves in all 3 relationships as far as witness is concerned. That once we have received God's forgiveness and abundance, like the younger son, we have a choice to make as to what our future witness becomes. Will it be more like the Father, because we have been offered that grace ourselves and we want to create a grace-filled world full of abundance and love and welcome? Or will it be like the older brother, a little stingy with what we have already received and resentful of others who are given grace? I look forward to hearing your wrestlings with this story as we continue throughout our week, learning, living, loving, and leading our lives following Jesus. See you on Sunday.
Hello, St. Luke's. We're so glad that you are joining us. We have a very special podcast that we want to share with you. We have an incredible gift. Barbara Matsanga, did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Who is the director of our Zimbabwe ZOE program is with us. We've been involved with ZOE Empowers for many years, and we're so excited to be able to get to talk to Barbara today. We're also joined by some St. Lukers. Let's have them introduce themselves. Mariam, we'll start with you.
Good morning, St. Luke's. My name is Mariam Mengistie, and I serve at St. Luke's as the Executive Director of Missions, which includes the ZOE ministry.
And I am Ann Eppinger. I'm a layperson, a member of St. Luke's, and I am the ZOE core team leader at St. Luke's. I've also been on the ZOE Empowers National Board, and I advocate for ZOE in churches around the state of Florida. Our family has been involved with ZOE since 2010. So we're big believers and excited to be with you this morning.
Barbara, we're so glad that you're chatting with us because we have learned so much from ZOE over the last, gosh, it's been a decade, maybe almost close to a decade that we've been involved. And so we just tell us a little bit about yourself, Barbara, and your work with ZOE first.
I don't know where to start from, but I thank God for having been one of those staff members, the best staff members to join ZOE Empowers since 2011. And we've grown in terms of staff. We now have 7 project facilitators. We also have an accounting person. We also have a communications officer. We started off our program in Makoni district, and we moved into Mutare district, and we are now in Mutasa district. And over the years, we have grown, and we have received a lot of commendation about the good work that ZOE Empowers is doing. Unlike other organizations that are more of relief, ZOE Empowers is an empowering project that has made a huge footsteps in the communities that we have worked. And more importantly, the issues to do with the social exclusion for the vulnerable has actually been addressed by the ZOE Empowers model, which actually identifies the vulnerable and rests them on a solid rock. I think you can read in Psalms 40, verse 1 to 3. He lifted me up from a slimy pit and rested me on a hard surface. This is what ZOE has done in the communities that we have been working with.
That is so beautiful because we have so many people in our country that are excluded, they're pushed out, even from churches, even from God, they say. And you have shown us how everyone is welcome at a table and everyone has a voice. How many children do you work with at ZOE who are vulnerable?
The number of children that we work with at the moment, we are working with 75 groups. 72 groups, and each group constitutes plus or minus 30 households. And then the number of households also is about 2,160. That's the total number of children we are working with.
That's amazing. And
Yes.
and I know we have some questions we're going to get to, but I just, in a snapshot, and could you take these children into a 3-year program, correct?
Yes, correct.
And what is it that you are teaching these children of all ages, really?
We're teaching them love. We're teaching them unity. We're teaching them to work together and see each other as one community, one household. Remember, they are coming from a background of vulnerability where they used to be excluded in every activity within the community. They were isolated. They were regarded as thieves because they never had anything. They were exploited of their labor because they would work in people's plots for a plate of a meal per day. So coming together, we teach them how to depend on each other, how to empower themselves, how not to overtrust, but to create love that should bind themselves together.
Well, you just preached our sermon for Sunday. So thank you, Barbara. As usual, whenever you speak, I'm in tears.
So we cover different categories under the ZOE program. And for what is important to us is to ensure that they come out of their poverty. That's why you find we introduce issues to do with income generating activities at household level, as a family, and also at group level, so that they begin to work together and share expertise and skills among themselves, and then transfer them to their household, where they will be able to implement the ideas that they come up with at group level. We also talk about food security, because remember, they used to go and work in people's fields, maybe for very little, because they were exploited. So we teach them to be food secure. And one of the strengths under the ZOE program is that in their first year, upon recruitment, they get food, they get seed and fertilizer, so that they can grow the main cereal, which is sadza, which is very common. And once that is done, but before they get those seed and fertilizer, they are trained on how to farm properly, so that they can get the yields that they want. So that is food security is another key thematic area. We also teach them health, good health, health and hygiene. Again, coming from a background of poverty, going for a bath, brushing teeth, combing your hair is a luxury, because you don't have the soap, you don't have the toothpaste, you don't have the comb to comb your hair. So we also teach them about health and hygiene, so that they become acceptable amongst themselves and within the community. We also encourage them to practice good hygiene and good health standards. If they fall sick, traditionally and historically, they would go to traditional healers, or they will just go into the bush and get a shrub or a herb to treat whatever ailments they will be going through. But when we then introduce ZOE to them, we teach them how they can access good medical treatment for any ailments that they will be going through. So we teach them also how to eat well from the nutrition gardens, that we will teach them how to grow good food and vegetables that they can eat with the cereal sadza. Teach them that. And during malaria times, we also teach them to protect, because malaria is one of the biggest killer in our country. We teach them how to protect themselves from malaria. And now we're teaching them how to protect themselves from COVID-19. And this has worked tremendously. You would want to know that ZOE went outside the normal funding and fundraised for COVID assistance for our children. COVID came unprepared for everyone. So we managed to give them the necessary training around health, so that they protect themselves. And some of the children started sewing masks, and they sold for they sew masks for their other members, and for other community members, they would sell at a subsidized level. They also helped in propagating the information, selling the information on how important it is to always mask up, to always wash hands. And we also issued them with tapping buckets, which is an innovation that came from the children, where at every household, you would get a tapping basket, which would have water that can be used to wash the hands. So that's about health. I can go on and on around health. We also teach them about education, access to education, because you cannot talk about empowerment without talking about education. So we talk to them, because the heads of all those households would have pulled out of school long back. Right. So we encourage them to come up with income generating projects, so that they can send their siblings to school. And we also have a budget on education, which is provided for by the ZOE Empowers. We also identify under housing. We also believe that if they have adequate shelter, not fancy shelter, but decent, so that they can also house themselves and their siblings in decent homes. So upon the recruitment, when we recruit them, we also identify those children whose houses are condemned, because some of the shelter that they come from is condemned. No one would ever think that a human being is coming from there. So we identify them for renovation. And the other thing is we also emphasize on vocational skills training as a biggest form of empowerment, because that has changed lives in the community, where we have our beneficiaries getting in carpentry, in welding, in dressmaking, and they also learn how to and also they learn how to do other skills like hairdressing. They have existing skills, but they are polished up, and then they become more marketable. But because ZOE is so biblically founded, we teach them about the spiritual well-being. At every meeting, they start off with a prayer session, and they share the word of God, and they close with a prayer. So the spiritual well-being of each child in the ZOE program is very important. And right now, they are guided at every group of Jeremiah 29, verse 11. That motivates them to look forward to a better future, because their work, they know, is grounded in the word of God. And they know the majority of people who are supporting the ZOE Empowers program, they belong in churches. They come from churches. So they know the connection that is there between the ZOE Empowers partners and the ZOE beneficiary is through the word of God. They believe it is a relationship that was created by God for the sustenance of humankind.
Thank you so much. That's so powerful. And it really speaks to who we are as Methodists, the wholeness of a child and the wholeness of people, that we have to empower people means all of those things that you talked about, healthcare and hygiene and education. So one of the things, Anne, tell us one of the things that I understand that you first do with children, and I got to meet some of them when I was in Rwanda, is this idea of a dream chart.
Exactly.
And you saw some, right?
Pardon? Yeah.
You
we
saw
did.
some dream charts and how empowering that was. Can you tell us, Barbara, how you use those dream charts with the children?
Apparently, they brought their own dream charts, and I don't know whether it is visible from this side. Can you see?
Yes.
You can.
Mm-hmm.
The dream chart is what makes them sad. That is the first column. Because as you will be implementing the project, you also want to ensure that some of their mental wellness is also addressed. So we are aware of their backgrounds. So we want to know in the first column here, what made you sad? And what is it? I'm just asking Panache here, what made him sad? Perhaps he can explain to me, and then I will translate what made you sad. But I can see a coffin here, the coffin of your parents. Yeah. You lost both your parents. You lost both your parents. So in this case, the dream chart, for most orphans, you would see a coffin with a cross of their parents. That usually is characteristic of every child who is in the ZOE program. And then you go to the second. So as you recruit them, you also want to address their mental challenges so that they begin to see a future, a good future, even in the absence of their parents. So the second column will be what I like. And as you can see what I like, can you see something there?
Yes, we sure can.
Yes. So what he says, Panache here, what he likes playing football. He also likes to have a house. He loves church. That's a church with a cross. And then this one is on. He also loves reading a novel. And this one. He also loves to watch television. Do you have a television now? So it's something that he dreams of. But currently he enjoys going to church playing soccer, and reading novels, as well as dreaming to have a television. And once he works hard in his income generating projects, he will be able to buy a television and enjoys himself. The third column is this one, what I do not like. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, I'm asking him what he doesn't like. What is it that you don't like? He says, you can see two people here. He says he doesn't like fighting, to see people who are fighting. And then this one. He says he doesn't like people who drink beer, and he doesn't like to drink beer himself. And then this one. Beaten snake. He doesn't like to be beaten by snakes. Apparently, snakes are common. It's a common phenomenon in our rural areas, and many children, even adults, they get bitten by snakes. So he doesn't like snakes.
I don't like snakes either. So we're in good company.
All right. And then the last column before we go to the values is this one. Dream of the future. What do you see yourself in the future? So he says, what do you want? He says he wants to build a big house. We have cows in here. He says he wants to help his siblings go back to school in here. He says he wants to have enough food to eat in here. He says he also wants to learn mechanical engineering, motor mechanics, and then here. And then he also points out to having enough clothes and shoes. That is his dream. So this is the characteristic of a dream chart in every child. And then the middle column talks about the guiding principles. What guides you? What should guide you for you to be able to achieve the desired future and to experience his dream? He says, praying, he believes so much in prayer, he feels God will hear him and he will resource his ways. And he also says working very hard. He says if he puts enough effort and works hard, he will be able to realize his dreams. He also says determination. He says he's a focused person, and if he remains focused and determined, he will be able to realize a future that he has explained. So basically, the dream chart enables ZOE workers, the project facilitators, to understand from day one what the child is, almost like a planning tool, what he wants to do in the future. And how we use the dream chart is that at every stage when we make home visits to these children, we also want to check how much of their desires they've achieved. In some children, you realize within the 3 years, we tell them the program is only for 3 years and your dream design should be achieved within 3 years. So at every stage, we monitor how much of what you wrote down have you achieved. And in some cases where you find a determined and focused child, you find that what they had planned to achieve in 3rd year can actually be achieved in the 2nd year. So they continue to grow the list, because once you achieve one item or 2nd items, you continue to grow until the program is finished, so that we continue to motivate them to work hard and achieve more for themselves, because ZOE is intended to be implemented within 3 years. So for ZOE workers, this is a monitoring and evaluation tool, something that we use each time we visit the children. And as we go to each household, We expect them to have it against the wall. We can just check if they now have a house, if they now have cows, if they have enough clothing according to their dream chart.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And Anne, you've gotten to travel and see those dream charts on the walls, haven't you?
Absolutely. I think you and I have too. Frequently, they're on a business, they're on a home wall, they're proudly displayed. And it is really cool what Barbara said, because the kids, you can see a check mark beside one of the dreams. And then there's another dream behind it. And sometimes there's a list of checks that people have achieved dreams. I love it because it's practical. It's looking backwards at, you know, where the children have come from, but it's helping them look forward with an achievable plan. I love it.
Right. And it really gets into, this is where I come from, and this could be something that's fearful that I hide away, but you all bring it to the forefront and say, no, when we bring it to the light, there's nothing to be afraid of because we can move to the future. I just love that, Barbara. That's really powerful.
It's actually a pictorial presentation of what they have in mind. And they are determined because the said part is the first column. So they are determined to move to where there's positive life. And it brings a sense of responsibility and accountability. They should be able to account for every activity that they are doing so that they check even on their own whether they are still in line to achieve that special dream that they see themselves in the future. So at the end of the day, you have a vision of where the child is going. And as you see the progress that they will be making, you can rest assured that this child will realize their dreams because of the progress that they are making at household level. It also helps them, the dream chart helps them to keep focused because they look at it and it's stuck on their walls. So they always have a look at the dream chart and they can easily whip themselves back into line if they realize that they are falling far much away from what their dream is about. And in the dream chart, when they visit and have mutual groups meetings, they also check on each other's chart. And they have moments of celebration. Oh, you have already achieved this. This is quick. How did you do it? So it's a moment of sharing as well with their colleagues in the group.
That leads me to another question that we wanted to talk about. You've had 80 to 100 children work together over 3 years. They are so tight knit, and you drew it. They are a family. They empower one another, which is biblical. It's how we understand what it means to be a neighbor, which we in America kind of struggle with. There's a lot of competition and we don't necessarily always work together. What is the secret behind what you do with those children?
The group projects. Group projects where they work together. They also develop constitutions and they know how to do constitutions, like an understanding
right
what each member should abide by. So they also have fines that they introduce. If a member fails to attend meetings, there's a fine. And if a member absenting themselves, is something that is drawn by the members themselves. They agree together to say, this is what we are going to observe as a group. So they do projects together and that brings unity. Like a nutrition garden. They will be taking turns to come to water the garden. They will harvest it together. If they are selling to the market, they sell together. If they realize the profits, they share amongst themselves. And also, they've also come up with the idea of saving, what they call table banking, where they contribute some money in a pot and the members can come and borrow. If one has a project and needs more money, they can come and borrow and then return it on a fee. And they have rules and regulations that guides that. They also have team building exercises They can form teams of soccer or netball. They play together, compete with other groups. And that way they remain together. And there's one thing that I don't know, I am sure I have forgotten to tell you. At the recruitment, the best way to identify another child who is vulnerable is to use them. Ask them to lead us to the next vulnerable child. And that unit, knowing that they all come from poverty, poverty is their identification. They would want each and every one amongst themselves to be successful and move away from poverty. So at identification, when you use another vulnerable child to identify another vulnerable child, what we call snowballing, right, it has a huge effect. And the other, they will always remember each other for having remembered each other. They say, if it were not you, I could have been forgotten because I stayed too far away. But you remembered me because I dropped out of school when my parents died. Thank you for bringing me into the program. So they will form a neat group and they will always look out for each other. They are their brothers' keepers and their sisters' keepers. And we promote exchange visits so that we continue to encourage each other to do better. Because in any group, you find someone who is excelling. You get mediocres and you get somebody who is slow. So we encourage a lot of project visits, exchange visits, so that they learn from each other. And because they stay within the same community, they can also do their own individual visit, having been inspired. They will create time on their own to go and visit that successful somebody. And that on its own binds them together. The dream chat sharing, I've already talked about that I excel. They also have moments of celebration where they realize this one is done very well. They come together and they celebrate. We have those that do not have too many siblings, but they have big fields. So they grow, for instance, when they grow maize, harvesting because they don't have equipment to harvest the maize. So they come together as group to do what we call mutual help. They come as group and they harvest at the families together. And usually I have witnessed several of them. And when those activities happen, when they come and help each other, the host will cook a meal for all the members. And they also invite some of the members to assist in the cooking. Because remember, you'll be cooking for about 28 people or 30. And usually when they do that, from their own gardens, each will come with some leaves of vegetables. Someone can bring a portion of cooking oil. And then the other person can bring the cereal or mealie meal cooking. So it's a wonderful setup where you find children with one identity coming together and having no boundaries at all, but seeking to help each other at those special occasions.
Sounds very similar to the kingdom of God and the banquets of the kingdom of God, where they came and they brought and they were. I love, Barbara, when you said, I remember you because you remember me. If that's not the gospel exactly. Of Jesus Christ, I don't know what is.
And the group arrangement is designed in such a way that whatever a member does benefits individual groups. So there is commonality in sharing. If someone is growing vegetables and they are selling very well, they immediately share within the group that this is making good money. Let's all do it. And if there's need for anybody who realizes that I have a bumper harvest, they also go and assist even in the marketing. So through savings and mutual help activities, you find that the group stays together and they look out for each other almost every day.
That's amazing. So tell us, the powers in the group, right? One of the things, Miriam, we've tried to do that here with East Winter Garden, with the families we work at with Maxie, and they're really bonded in a lot of ways. But the problem we have here, and Barbara, you may experience it there, is the systems outside, whether it's city governments or process and procedures, sometimes work against the people. Miriam, am I saying that correctly?
Yes, absolutely. Although there is the bonding within the group, sometimes the group they experience barriers that are there with the policies or some of the rules and regulations that are put for everybody, but there are still barriers for some of our families. But we do, yeah. Go ahead, Jen.
Go ahead, Miriam.
But one thing that we really appreciate and would like to learn from the ZOE model is that not just at government level, but at a village level, you bring the whole community, the village chiefs, the government actually is a really huge partner for your program. So how does that process work?
Okay. Apparently, yes, divisions are always there, barriers are always there, but in our situation where you find the government has not done much in terms of development in the rural areas, when they see partners like ZOE Empowers, they feel ZOE is now a panacea to the problems that they have been having within their communities. Our communities have been neglected and the rural development is lagging behind. For instance, in terms of education, most children in the rural areas do not go to school because there's no government support. The clinics are not resourced, so people will resort to go to traditional healers or use herbs. So when organizations like the ZOE Partners comes in, they embrace them, because at least they will know in this particular community, we know for the 3 years, there is not going to be a problem of this nature because ZOE has worked very well. We now have a historical past that testifies to the work that we do. We have 11 years of experience, and they know in each community where we have worked, we have left a huge elephant footprint, which shows the huge work that we have done. So in our area, the government is very supportive. And the trick that we do is when we are in the communities, we know how manipulated the poor are. So we work with the traditional leadership, the structures that are on the ground, and we tell them this program is for these vulnerable children. We will be working closely with them, and no one outside the identified categories of vulnerability will benefit. And they have now understood that this program is targeted at the beneficiaries, and it's intended to stay only for 3 years. And after that, it won't last. So the barriers, they've sort of fizzled out. If there had been somebody who wanted to manipulate the system so that they divert the assistance to them, it has failed, because we also recruit mentors from the community to monitor the project when we are not there. And the traditional leadership also endorse the list, the vulnerability list of children. And they confirm these children have been poor, they've been orphaned, and they've been struggling. So they are also keen to see these children out of the miseries that they have had. ZOE complements government efforts. We come out very clear. We are not a political organization. We are only coming in to complement government effort. So they have seen that because we now have a record that shows this is exactly what we have been doing. It works in collaboration with traditional leaders and other opinion leaders within the community, including churches. They are part of the community that we work with. Because of the realization that ZOE is doing well, the traditional leaders have actually given us land for free for our groups to use in order to increase food security. And with regards to workshop venues, or if we want to have any trainings, the community structures are availed to ZOE Empowers Zimbabwe for free, because they know the program has an impact at the end of the day. And this has helped, because even when we have conflict is easily managed, because we are very transparent in what we do as ZOE Empowers. And that on its own provides a security or a fence around the children who are recruited in the ZOE program.
That's incredible. I love you said it was a panacea for the community,
Yes.
which is so powerful, and that historically you've left a mark. In fact, you said you leave a huge elephant footprint.
Exactly.
All right, St. Luke's, we can do that too.
Yeah, sure you will.
And it just became aware to me, one of the things that I've seen Zimbabwe ZOE just do so many incredible things responding to need of isolated children. And Barbara, I just read a memo about what Dennis had done to particularly reach a sector of your population, which were, I think, special needs children.
Yes.
Could you just give one, that's just one example of what I've seen you do since I've known you, of how you guys address kids who are isolated, kids that are totally shunned. Could you just speak to that just for a minute?
Yes, social exclusion of the disabled. That is a serious case where we realize that in our communities, disability is hidden. It's not easily talked about. And as a result, it increases vulnerability. Most disabled are isolated, just like the vulnerable, poor, and orphaned. So in a way to try and understand where this is coming from, our officer, namely Dennis, actually embarked on a program. He went to study and understand vulnerability and how we can incorporate it in the ZOE program. So we are also seeking to identify those households with a disability, where we can identify an able-bodied head of household who can also work so that the disabled can also have their rights observed and respected. Respect is key in love and kindness. And when a community loses respect, then it loses everything, because even the vulnerable will be trampled upon. So we identified disability as an issue that is increasing isolation of children within communities. I don't know if I have spoken well to that one. Have I answered you, Anne?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. In most of our households, if you go to rural community, because of, the assistive devices, for instance, wheelchairs or walking sticks or hearing aids or spectacles, those items are very expensive and beyond the affordability of most households. So when disability is in the family, those disabled persons are hidden in the house because they associated disability with a curse. They think it's a curse, you must have done something against God, and as a result, you have a disabled person in the home. So they are hidden in the home, and even if you carry out statistics, if you want to do enumeration at a household level, they will not include that disabled person, because they say that person is not productive and therefore not eligible to be enlisted as a member of a household. So we're trying to create awareness so that we have the love of God that does not exclude anyone. We talk about social inclusion of the disabled in any setup. And we said we must come out in the open. If there's any need for those disabled persons, for them to go to hospital, can we not support them? So this is the awareness that we are creating within our communities so that the disabled also have their rights respected and upheld.
Barbara, that's beautiful. We are studying the Gospel of Luke, in which Jesus does that. He's constantly healing the people who were socially excluded and bringing them into community. So you just, again, shared such a powerful testimony that we can learn from.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So with the ZOE model, the ZOE model is about empowerment. So a head of household who is disabled is not necessary, would not qualify. Because remember, we go for garden projects, we do mutual help works together. He also or she also participates in business. But because of their disability, they will not be able to do that. So what we do is the ZOE Empowers is we work together with other organizations with speciality in helping the disabled. So we do what we call layering of services. So when we are in the field and we realize that there's a particular household that is suffering and the head of the household is disabled, we then refer the organization to go and assist that particular family. So in a way, we are coming in a community and we are saying, communities, please feel free to tell us some of the handicaps that society in this community has so that we can refer them to other organizations that can offer help. We also realize that the ZOE Empowers cannot go into a community and do everything.
Right.
A mammoth task. So we can only contribute to a transformation in a community. But working together with other civil society organizations, we can transform the communities. But for those households that we are working with, we can also confirm that we give total transformation within the 3-year period that ZOE Empowers will be working in.
That's amazing. So Miriam, how many ZOE children have we been a part of their partnering with them?
Oh, so from the beginning, just St. Luke's, sponsored by St. Luke's, because we have other individuals outside of St. Luke's whom we collaborate with, but just from St. Luke's, we have been supporting 12 groups in Rwanda and Zimbabwe, and that's 340 households, and that makes up 1,050 children. So that's the return on investment based on what Barbara is saying is evident, and that's why we are really committed to this ministry and the lessons that we learn, right?
Right. Barbara, can we meet the young people that are there with you again?
Sure.
Hi.
If you'll tell us your name and the group, the family group that you're with.
My name is Panashe. I'm from Abundance Group.
And you're in your 3rd year, correct?
Yeah, I'm in 3rd year.
And so what are your businesses?
As for me, I'm an adventure in buying and selling of second-hand clothes and shoes.
Fantastic, fantastic. And so how many people are in your family group?
In my group.
Say it again.
You mean in my group?
Yes.
I don't have, I'm only one.
Okay, all right. And who else is with you today?
He's also my colleague.
Yes. Can she introduce herself? I know we have to translate.
Barbara, let me ask you, while you getting help fixing that, you were talking to, was it Menashe that you were talking to, who's a 3rd year? Was that his dream chart that we saw?
Yes, that was his dream chart.
Okay, I just wanted to ask because he was talking off screen. And so that was his dream chart of a 3rd year, someone who's entering the 3rd and final year of the program. Is that correct?
Correct.
And he is from one of the groups that St. Luke supports in Zimbabwe.
Abundance. Yes.
Yeah.
St. Luke supports Abundance Group. Yes. You Luke currently supports 4 groups from Zimbabwe.
Great.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And then
Go
we have Rumbizai.
ahead.
We have Rumbizai. She's introducing herself.
Great.
And she is from the Precious group, and she's in her first year, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And I understand that you have that one of the things that you do is that you have a razor and you're becoming a hairstylist, right? You're cutting hair.
Yes. That's yes, and cut. Yes.
Good. Well, I can't wait to meet you because it looks like hopefully maybe we're taking a trip there soon. And so maybe we'll get to have a chance and we'll have some of our, especially our men, ready to get a haircut. How about that?
Yeah, sure. To look weird. It's no weird also. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
She's happy. She's already anticipating some money coming.
That would be wonderful. We would take video. That would be so wonderful.
Yes, that would be great.
Miriam or Ann, do you have anything else that you want to add?
Well, I kind of just wanted to ask Ravitsa, she's a first year. She's just starting the 3-year journey. And I want to say, I want to ask what her dream was. What does she dream for her future?
We also, let me ask you, and then I'll translate. She brought her dream chart as well.
Oh, good.
Oh, can you see it?
Yeah, but just tell us what her dream is. I'm just curious.
All right.
What's the girl dream of?
What made her sad? The death of her parents. And then what she likes is going to church and what he wants to say. And playing netball. And then what she doesn't like, to see people fighting. And yeah. And she doesn't like people who gossip.
Good for her.
Then her dream for the future. Let's hear it's a house. She says she also wants to build her own home. And then she also wants to buy goats. She also wants to buy cows. Cows and goats are a form of wealth in the
Yes,
rural,
they are.
because you can actually invest, and then when you run dry, you can sell one and get money, pick money, and then this. Their dream for the future is to have more food, because in the past they used to take turns to eat, but when ZOE came, they are now eating almost every day. And then this. Okay, and then she also has the Baba, the clip that she is using now to cut men's hair. And these days, we also have females who are deciding to go bald. So the clip is working for males as well as females. And
All right.
then principles are, she's saying, for me to achieve a better future, she has to remain prayerful and respecting elders in the community and listening to their advice, as well as listening to other group members. Those are her guiding principles.
Barbara, when did her group start? When did the Precious group start? Was it this year?
So it's class 2 of 2021.
Okay, so it started in October of 2021. That was the group that we fundraised for with our 5K last year. Very exciting. Thank you.
Correct. Yeah.
Miriam, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just want to a huge thank you for Barbara and both of the students who are there. You took us to church, so thank you so much for that. Really powerful stories and principles that you shared with us. I just want to tell you that when we started the microfarm at St. Luke's, the unfortunate thing was we started it in the midst of the pandemic in 2020. And the model is exactly what we envisioned and learned from ZOE that we want to bring to the community. but it's taken us a while to really bring the whole community around those. But I took some notes today, and in front of everybody and in front of you, this is what I think we're going to be doing, because the dream charts, if we involve the community in the dream charts and the guiding principles for each farm area, and the group agreement accountability, but most importantly, celebrating. You reminded us today how celebration is really a key part of bringing community. So we promise you that we've learned these lessons today. You reminded us in a powerful way. So we are looking forward to incorporate this in our own ministry. So thank you for the gift.
Thank you very much. We remain very thankful for all the support that you are giving us. And we pray that you continue to extend the territory and you have more people to support the ZOE program. In that way, we also learn. And thank you. I know Anne took me to your church. I was welcomed in such a huge manner. I really am grateful to the welcome, the hospitality that I got when I visited America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. And St. Lucas, we want you to, bye. St. Lucas, we want you to know that we're going to be sharing some of this podcast throughout October and November, because we are going to be doing our Advent offering, and our Christmas Eve offering is going to be supporting ZOE and starting new groups. So we want you to be a part of it. If you'd like to know more, there's going to be some information sessions coming up, or you can always reach out to Anne or myself or Miriam, and we'd love to help you get involved with this incredible empowerment mission. So thank you, Barbara, for joining us, and for the kids. God's blessings on you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We pray that you visit us soon.
Excellent.
Oh, we will. We will. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Looking forward to that. Bye.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.